This week, the Shrek franchise continues with Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, so it's time to rank all 6 Shrek movies from worst to best. Coming out last place at number 6 is Shrek the Third. I don't know what happened between the first 2 films and this one, but somewhere down the line, something went terribly wrong. This film has none of the energy of the previous 2 films, none of the jokes land, and the plot's pretty thin. There is a fun idea of having Prince Charming team up with the other fairy tale villains, but even then, the message of the film is exactly the same as the first one, but this time done in an even more heavy-handed way. Now, there's a huge gap between the other films on this list. Shrek the Third is the only one I gave a negative review to. All of these other ones, I gave positive reviews. Number 5, Shrek Forever After. In some ways, this is a bit of a course correction from Shrek the Third. There's certainly a lot more energy in this film. There's some creative ideas, like making the Pied Piper bounty hunter who has a flute with different settings to control when he's hunting. Rumpelstiltskin is kind of a fun villain, even if he's not particularly threatening. But what holds it back is the end goal of the movie is exactly the same as the first one. Shrek has to get Fiona to fall in love with him, they fight against the evil king, true love, kiss saves everything. It's a bit of a retread from the first film, but I still have a good time with it when I watch it. Number 4, Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. I enjoyed how this one has a very different animation style than the other films. It looks like an animated storybook. This film has just as much energy and humor as the previous Puss in Boots film. It really goes back to the fairy tale satire of the Shrek franchise. But what holds it back for me is there are a few too many villains, and it's kind of confusing as to when this movie takes place, because it is supposedly a prequel, but at the end of the film it kind of hints that it takes place after the other Shrek movies. And if that's the case, how are the 3 bears the villains in this, if in the first one Lord Farquaad killed the mama bear? It's a nitpick, but I prefer when things feel like they have continuity, so little things like that kind of irk me. Number 3, Puss in Boots. Now, after the disastrous Shrek the Third, the surprisingly good Shrek 4, I was kind of skeptical about keeping the franchise going with a spin-off film because those tend to not work, but this is easily one of the best in the franchise. The story takes the franchise in a new direction by focusing less on satirizing fairy tales and instead becoming a Western heist film. Jack and Jill are this Bonnie and Clyde duo. They make really fun villains. Puss has a really great repertoire with Kitty Softpaws. The chase sequences of the film are exciting. And the film has a great redemption arc for all the main characters. Number 2, Shrek. The blockbuster smash hit that was the first movie to ever win an Oscar for Best Animated Film. And for good reason. It's clever, hilarious, has memorable characters, and even over 20 years later, the animation still surprisingly holds up. And even though the main idea is comedy and satire, the film also has a sweet message about not judging by appearances, inner beauty, and is surprisingly deep. It's honestly a masterpiece, though I do think the internet obsesses over this film a bit too much. And coming at number 1 is Shrek 2. This was released during a time when animated sequels, with the exception of Pixar, who even then only had 1 sequel under their belts, could be kind of hit or miss, and this was a huge hit. And because instead of retreading the same ideas as the first one, it instead expands on them in creative ways, like making Fairy Godmother and Prince Charming the villains. That's a really fun idea. Making Shrek a human during the last third is kind of a fun twist. Antonio Banderas and Eddie Murphy worked very well off each other comedically, and the film has even sharper writing than the original, so it comes in at number 1. So go ahead and share your ranking of all 6 Shrek movies, and if you want my full thoughts on each individual Shrek films, I have reviews of all of them that I did back in January, so you go ahead and look for those. I also reviewed all the other DreamWorks films in January, so if you want to see what my previous ranking for the Shrek films were before updating it, you can check those videos out, and I will see you next time.